A journalist mocked Keanu Reeves at a charity gala. No one expected his calm response to shake the entire room. So how did Keanu react? Was he silenced, or did he take over the stage? In this event, you'll see how Keanu gained power through silence. The Fairmont Grand Hotel's ballroom was dazzling, mesmerizing, and grand. The light filtering through the crystal chandeliers shimmered on the surface of glass goblets, while the soft music echoing through the walls completed the atmosphere. Every detail had been meticulously chosen. Tonight, the most prestigious names had gathered: titans of business, artists, media figures. They were all here for charity, but everyone had something else on their mind. This wasn't just a gala. This was a show of power. In the ballroom, away from the spotlight, Keanu Reeves sat at a table, the most distinct figure of the night. He didn't care about being the center of attention. He was still, just watching. It was in his nature. He was one of Hollywood's brightest stars, but here, he was merely an observer. As people turned their gaze toward the stage, Keanu glanced at the glass on the table for a brief moment. The flickering reflections in his goblet whispered that something was about to change. Conversations rose around the table, laughter echoed. Waiters gracefully served plates, while the delicate sound of a violin played in the background. The gala program was proceeding, but the moment everyone was waiting for had yet to come. Finally, the chatter in the ballroom gradually faded. All eyes turned to the stage. As the host announced the night's keynote speaker, something shifted. For a few seconds, the air seemed heavier. Even the reflections in the glass remained still. And then, that person stepped onto the stage. He walked to the podium, confident, smug, radiating self-assurance. His gaze scanned the crowd. He wasn't just a speaker. He was a fighter who had come to prove himself. Keanu Reeves lifted his head slightly. This wouldn't be just a speech. This would be a challenge. As the speaker stepped onto the stage, a vague wave of unease rippled through the ballroom. With unwavering confidence, he grasped the microphone. His voice was deep and clear. "It is truly a privilege to be here tonight." The guests in the ballroom expected a conventional opening, elegant, polite, full of courtesy. But Keanu Reeves, he sensed the intent beneath those words. This wasn't going to be just a gratitude speech. The speaker began pacing the stage with deliberate steps. His gaze swept across the room. His words were still soft, but they were about to sharpen. "We are all here because of our achievements, because of who we are and what we've done, right?" He paused for a moment. "But what about those who are respected just for existing?" This time, the silence lasted a few seconds longer. Some guests exchanged glances. No one responded outright, but they understood. Keanu Reeves didn't react, but something had shifted. The speaker's voice grew sharper. "Some people are recognized only as a face." This time, a few chuckled, but it wasn't an amused laugh. It was laced with tension. A few tables away, a woman set her glass down with irritation. A man leaned slightly forward in his chair, his eyes drifting curiously toward Keanu. But Keanu, he remained still. The speaker had now chosen a clear target, and he turned directly toward Keanu's table. "For example, we have a figure here tonight who is famous for his silence." All eyes in the room suddenly shifted to Keanu Reeves. Some watched with excitement. Others shifted uncomfortably. A woman clutched her husband's arm as if silently asking, "Where is this going?" A small smirk appeared on the speaker's face. But Keanu, he reached for his glass. But he didn't drink. He just waited. The air in the ballroom had almost solidified. The ones who had laughed earlier were now averting their eyes. No one could understand why Keanu Reeves was still sitting motionless. It was as if a storm was raging at the center of the room, but Keanu stood right in its eye. The speaker leaned forward from the stage. His eyes narrowed, and his voice took on a mocking depth. "Oh, I'm sorry. Are we being too loud for you?" A few people chuckled, but this time the laughter was weak. No one looked entirely at ease. At a corner table, someone realized they had taken a deep breath. Another lifted their glass as if to take a sip, but they were only stalling for time. But Keanu didn't move. The speaker slowed down. A strange unease crept into him. Why wasn't this man reacting? He expected sarcasm, or maybe a smirk, perhaps even an irritated glare. But Keanu Reeves did nothing. He simply held his glass and waited. The silence in the room grew heavier. The man who had spoken sharply and confidently just moments ago was now feeling the weight of the microphone. Seconds ago, he believed he controlled the room. Now, who was really in control? One of the waiters stepped forward to collect glasses, but then hesitated. It was as if moving at the wrong moment could come at a heavy price. The speaker looked at Keanu Reeves again, slouched in his chair. But now, even looking at him was difficult. And in that moment, Keanu Reeves locked eyes with him. It wasn't a harsh stare. It wasn't filled with anger, but it was strong enough to make him swallow. The pen in the speaker's hand tapped against the podium. A tiny click, yet somehow it echoed. A woman clutched her husband's arm. "Where is this going?" Some quietly straightened in their chairs. The air was charged. And at that moment, the speaker realized he had lost control. The tension in the room was almost tangible. The speaker's confidence had cracked. He averted his gaze. His hands clutched the podium. For a moment, his eyes flickered toward the dark corners of the ballroom. But every eye was on him. There was nowhere to run. And then, Keanu Reeves stood up. The entire room held its breath. Nothing had ever been quieter or more threatening than that single movement. Everyone froze. Glasses sat still on the tables. Waiters halted mid-step. One guest leaned back slightly in their chair. Another hid their hands under the table. All eyes were on Keanu. What was he going to do? Keanu Reeves began walking toward the stage with silent steps. Each step echoed in the stillness of the room. Calm, measured, but with an unsettling certainty. The speaker's breath quickened. He gripped the podium tightly. Just seconds ago, the room had belonged to him. Now, did it? As Keanu Reeves approached the stage, the speaker's gaze became evasive. The crowd was watching Keanu, but they were looking at the speaker. The stage lights hit Keanu's face, casting shadows along the contours of his cheeks. It was as if he were at the peak of a theatrical performance. But this wasn't scripted. This was real. Keanu stopped right in front of the speaker. Every single pair of eyes in the room locked onto that one point. No one moved. And when his eyes met the speaker's, for a moment, time stopped. The speaker cleared his throat, but no sound came out. The tension in the room had reached its peak. Everyone was waiting for Keanu Reeves to speak, but he just stood there. 1, 2, 3 seconds passed. The silence was unbearable now. And then, Keanu Reeves took a deep breath. He wrapped his fingers around the microphone, and he spoke. Keanu Reeves lifted the microphone. It was as if every breath in the room had been cut off. Everyone was waiting. The speaker cleared his throat and subtly leaned back. But there was no escape. And then, Keanu Reeves began to speak. His voice was low, yet sharp. Sometimes, the ones who talk the most say the least. His words fell over the room like a heavy echo. No one moved. The waiters kept their hands fixed on the tables. A few people unconsciously sat up straighter in their chairs. All eyes were locked on the stage. Keanu Reeves turned his gaze toward the speaker. He was still silent, but the silence was only growing. The speaker's face tensed. His playful demeanor faded into a blank expression. And then, Keanu continued. It's easy to judge people, especially when you don't know them. But there's something you forgot. Silence is not always a weakness. Sometimes it's our greatest strength. The entire room froze. A few people nodded. Some pressed their lips tightly together. The speaker struggled to breathe. One of his hands was still gripping the podium, but the stage no longer belonged to him. Keanu Reeves scanned the room. His eyes moved across each face, searching, and when he found what he was looking for, he smiled, just slightly. One final look, and he placed the microphone back. Then, he quietly turned and returned to his seat. For a few seconds, absolute silence. A moment that felt as long as a heartbeat. Then, one person clapped. A single sound of applause, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet. People clapped with excitement. Some smiled in admiration, others bowed their heads. Even the waiters, relieved from the pressure, relaxed. And the speaker, he was still at the podium, but his legs trembled slightly. He placed his hand on the podium's edge, but his grip was weak. His eyes were fixed on a single point. Could he continue speaking? No. His throat was dry. Even his own words had abandoned him. The crowd's thunderous applause rang in his ears. But to him, this wasn't a victory. It was a courtroom, and he had been judged. The microphone before him was now just a piece of metal. It had no power, no voice, and in a space that no longer belonged to him, he was drowning. Let Keanu Reeves's example be a reminder for all of us. Words have power. Use them wisely. Whether you're speaking with a friend, a stranger, or someone you disagree with, choose respect and empathy. If you agree with us, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories. Subscribe, and let's keep the conversation going with stories that challenge and inspire us to be better.